Welcome to our Real Estate Tech Series. I'm Lauren Keim with the world-renowned Goodman Center for Real Estate at Lehigh University, where we both research the trends and the future of real estate, and where we educate the future leaders of the industry. We have a really, truly fascinating discussion today, and I'm going to introduce our guests in just a minute. But I want to start by laying out some of the framework of the changing environment that we're going to see post-COVID, and actually that we're seeing a lot of right now. Obviously, we've been talking about healthier work environments and green work environments for years, and there have been a lot of new innovations in healthier, safer, and greener work and living spaces. But we're going through a massive acceleration of those changes right now, brought on by the pandemic. Real estate firms and landlords are making seismic shifts in the integration of state-of-the-art technology with physical services to maintain that healthier, safer work environment. And we're lucky today to have two incredible people from RXR. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the company, RXR is one of the largest landlords in Manhattan. And they are one of the earliest innovators and adapters of this new technology, combining high-tech sensors, data-driven apps, physical services, and optimal space configuration to provide a new vision for occupying office space in the future, and also residential space. Today, I'm excited to introduce them. I do want to put a shout out to the person who helped set this up, which is Jason Barnett, the Vice Chairman and General Counsel and Chief Administrative Officer of RXR Realty. And the two I'm going to introduce today include Matthew Boras, and I'm sorry if I mess up your name at all, please let me know. Senior Vice President on the investments team at RXR. He leads the digital ventures investment strategy, and he's responsible for sourcing, structuring, and executing investments in the early stage real estate technology companies. And Corey Clark, our second guest, is Vice President of Product Management for RXR's Digital Lab, where he's leading the development of RxWell, a comprehensive public health-based, data-driven platform for the workplace. He's responsible for software and hardware roadmap for technology partnerships, go-to-market, and deployment for these RxWell products and services across RXR's portfolio, as well as third-party companies. Corey brings to RXR 20 plus years of experience bridging technology and design to deliver compelling user experiences. So welcome, guys. I know you have some slides that you're going to be sharing with us and discussing with us today. I really want to thank you for the opportunity and taking some time to be with us today.
Thanks.
Thanks, Lauren. I think, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you to you and the Lehigh team for inviting us to present here today. I think, our plan is to cover a few topics related to the work that RXR is doing in the real estate technology space. And, I'll start out with a quick overview of the RXR platform, followed by an overview of why and where RXR is spending its time on the real estate tech front from an investment perspective. Then I'll hand it over to my colleague, Corey, who can get into some of the specifics around RXR's workplace strategy as it relates to tech.
That sounds great.
So just to start by providing a quick snapshot of RXR's business as it stands today. As Lauren kind of started out by introducing us, RXR is an over 500 person organization based in New York, and is a vertically integrated owner, operator, and developer, probably best known for its office holdings, where we own over 26 million square feet. And over the years, we've diversified the business and grown the footprint in a couple of different directions, including asset classes like multifamily, industrial, and infrastructure. Examples of some of the projects are pictured on the slide here. RXR has partnered with JetBlue to build out 2 terminals at JFK. We're helping Google with their office campus expansion on the west side of Manhattan at Pier 57. And we're also in the process, or RXR is in the process of building a multi-story warehouse for Amazon in Maspeth, Queens. So as the 5th largest landlord in New York City, RXR's platform and depth and expertise across the value chain within real estate and construction makes it the perfect partner, we think, to partner with companies looking to grow within the New York City and tri-state area. And over the last decade, a big part of RXR's strategy has been to proactively engage the community around the assets that it acquires. And it has done so by partnering with outside organizations that bring community inside their projects, thereby bringing them to life. And so it's through this community-centric approach that ultimately led RXR to recognize kind of another change in business and consumer behavior, which we're here to talk about today, which was how technology has become so deeply ingrained in our lives, enabling new service models and new opportunities in the company. So in 2019, RXR decided to invest in building out its own technology arm, a business unit that it refers to as the RXR Digital Lab, to infuse technology into its real estate offering. As it stands today, the Digital Lab is now a team of over 25 people, comprised of data scientists, project managers, and engineers who work together to develop digital solutions for RXR's own needs. And you'll hear Corey go into more detail on some of these things later on in the presentation. And so now, in addition, building on RXR's expertise on both the real estate and technology side of the business, we've also launched a new investment strategy, a venture capital fund focused on investing in companies that are innovating at this intersection of real estate and tech. We've made over 10 investments to date, ranging from early stage venture to growth capital, and are actively looking for opportunities where the RXR Realty platform can add strategic value to startups by leveraging RXR's physical footprint, in-house expertise, and network. And so why are we doing this? We believe that there's a seismic shift underway within real estate, kind of across all asset types, across the value chain. Real estate, despite being one of the largest asset classes, or the largest, asset class on the planet, is one of a few industries that has really failed to embrace technology and consistently ranks at the bottom of the list in terms of digital maturity. To put that into context from an investment opportunity perspective, the real estate and construction industries represent the largest share of US GDP at 16%, yet the real estate industry spends half on IT of what other industries spend on average. So if the real estate and construction industries just spent a little bit more on technology, representing the largest share of US GDP, we think this has the potential to become one of the largest, if not the largest, categories within venture capital. And it's headed in that direction based on the latest funding numbers and year-over-year growth. And as shown at the bottom of the slide here, there are many companies that have already been formed in the space, validating the sector. And again, we think this is just the start. And so what do we actually mean when we say real estate technology? Just take a step back. We at RXR define real estate technology broadly as companies that develop technology which improves the way real estate is built, transacted, operated, utilized, and monetized. But from our perspective, this also includes the ecosystem around real estate, such as companies doing things in industries like logistics, mobility, and food as examples. It also includes adjacent categories like fintech, given the overlap between real estate and financial services. As far as how prop tech or the real estate tech sector has fared over the last year, given the impact of the pandemic, I would characterize, frankly, the results as mixed. On the one hand, we saw tech go from a quote unquote nice to have to a need to have almost overnight. Real estate owners were forced into an environment whereby they needed to both provide services to their customers, in this case tenants, services like self-guided asset tours to temperature scanners in the lobbies. In addition, landlords had to learn how to operate their own business remotely with a different workforce, distributed workforce rather, needing to rely heavily on software tools. That said, overall funding for the real estate tech startups dropped year over year, both in the US and globally. The number of new startups formed also declined, which we think reflects the overall uncertainty due to the pandemic. Startups whose business models were less impacted or actually helped in some way by the pandemic were the ones that we saw kind of attracting the majority of the capital in 2020, based on just, again, based on our observations. On the flip side, we think this dynamic is creating a scenario whereby there are a large number of underfunded companies that will be searching for strategic alternatives, resulting in, things like increased M&A activity and consolidation in the sector. And we're actually starting to see a little bit of this now. There was an announcement yesterday, as an example, about VTS, one of our portfolio companies, acquiring Rise Buildings, a tenant engagement app. And so, looking at the capital markets environment today, I think it's safe to say that prop tech companies have never had more outlets to fund their business, which is obviously a good thing. We saw Airbnb go public last year, and Procore announced that they're looking to go public this year. Also, we're starting to see an increasing number of prop tech companies raise real estate capital to scale their business, which we view as a growing trend. In terms of what we think will continue to drive demand for prop tech over the long term, we have two trends that we wanted to highlight that we think are particularly interesting and relevant that we're focused on. The first trend is something that has existed for some time now, which is that there's a generational shift underway within real estate. Millennials, as an example, are taking over leadership roles at real estate organizations. And unlike prior generations, millennials grew up with the internet their entire lives. And their lives today are governed by these amazing tech-enabled experiences, like shown on the page here, an Uber Eats or an Airbnb. And so now we've come to a point where it only makes sense to enable similar experiences at work and at home by adopting the tech and services required to deliver it. Again, we expect this demographic shift within the real estate industry to play out over the course of the next decade, dramatically impacting tech adoption within real estate. The second trend that we want to highlight that, unfortunately we're still living through is this COVID-19 health pandemic. And interestingly, we think a similar magnitude of change and innovation that we saw in the financial industry coming out of the great financial crisis, we think the real estate industry is experiencing now as a result of the pandemic. And probably, the best example, as shown on the slide here, is e-commerce and the impact that it is having on businesses across the board in terms of how consumers are now shifting to buying things online, which is forcing manufacturers and sellers to embrace an omni-channel approach to their business. We think this is a good analog for how landlords are now thinking about leasing their own space, and is also having an impact on how much space will actually be needed, especially if you're a business like a restaurant or a retailer. So as these trends that I just covered are serving as catalysts behind the adoption of tech within real estate, we're seeing companies that are reimagining real estate across the value chain with technology focused on things like online transactions, process automation, and an incredible amount of data being collected by new tools. So as consumer habits are changing and expectations are rising, technology companies are unlocking a massive opportunity for real estate incumbents and also their challengers to drive better consumer experiences. The companies on the slide here are a few of RXR's portfolio companies, which we think are representative of these themes. And I thought it would be a good idea, rather than trying to explain, the business models, to actually go through, real life examples and with our portfolio companies. So just to quickly run through what each one of these companies does and the value that they add to a customer perspective. From a customer perspective, we'll start with VTS. VTS is a software platform dedicated to commercial leasing. For those of you that are familiar with the commercial leasing process today, really for any building type, whether it's office, retail, or industrial, it's pretty much stuck in the Stone Age. So the real estate industry in general is fragmented. The leasing process itself is made up of multiple stakeholders. You have brokers, tenants, lawyers, property managers, and they still communicate and do business over the phone, fax, email. It's inefficient, to say the least. So what VTS has has done is successfully onboarded all these stakeholders onto a single platform and created a software tool that brings transparency to the process and saves everyone involved time and money by making them more efficient.
Is that something that is going to have that works with all the other software that's out there, or is this something that you have to be on that platform and competitors will try and get their share of that space?
Yeah, good question. I think, VTS has certainly taken a collaborative approach. I think they're, one of the interesting parts of the VTS business model and VTS as a company is I don't think there are many other companies out there that offer a competing or alternative product. And there's certainly incentives to be on the VTS platform in terms of being able to share with, in the experience streamline workflows with other stakeholders that allow you to execute on your business plan and the data that is generated from all the activity on their platform. If you're a user of the platform, you have access to the data, whether it's an anonymous benchmarking of market data or just market information in general. So I think that answers the question, but yeah. So anyways, VTS today, just to finish, VTS has over 60% of U.S. Class A office buildings onboarded onto the platform. And brokers and landlords are basically, and this is kind of the picture that we drew on the slide here, are basically using VTS as their Bloomberg terminal to search for information. And eventually, the vision is to be able to execute leases entirely online. And so Latch, as another example, is a smart access platform and operating system developed for multifamily buildings. And, as most of us know, most existing apartment buildings still use traditional lock and key system to enable residents to access their buildings and their units. And while this has generally worked fine, if you lose your key, you're out of luck and bear the cost of rekeying. It's difficult to give other people access. You have to coordinate the pickup and drop off of the key. And there's no functionality of the lock and key beyond simple access. With Latch, you simply download an app, use your smartphone to access your apartment, and then there's software in the back end that allows the building management to provision access and keep an audit trail of who's been in the building. So the cost of rekeying goes away, and the ability to provision access remotely enables other services like in-unit package delivery, dog walking, or even short-term rentals. Latch has also turned its locks into a smart home hub so that now you can use the Latch app to actually control your lights, your thermostats in your unit, and also pay rent. It's, the multifamily space in general is obviously a massive market. And now, the company likes to highlight 1 in 10 new apartments are using Latch locks. It's a great example of how technology is creating better experiences for residents in general, but RXR actually uses Latch locks in the majority of its multifamily buildings, which has enabled new service models.
I'm noticing that also in the short-term rentals that you were talking about, whether you're looking at Airbnb or something else, it makes it simpler for something to be recoded remotely and actually have new tenants in each week to occupy that space.
Yeah, I think it would be really hard, and it's, we've seen this in the past, even within RXR's own apartment buildings, trying to enable a service like short-term rentals to, again, provision access remotely and, give access if you're the unit owner to somebody else without meeting them, handing off a key. And, the digital lock and digital access system obviously takes a lot of the friction out of that process.
Matt, I don't want to interrupt you, but we did have a question from the audience. Is this something that works through Wi-Fi? What happens if Wi-Fi goes down, or what happens if the electric grid goes down? How do you rekey the lock, or is it something you have to wait for?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, it does operate through Wi-Fi, also Bluetooth technology, and then it also has a manual keypad on the lock to the extent that all other systems fail, so that you can always access your unit. So there's never a risk of being locked out when the Wi-Fi goes down.
Got it.
The last example on the page here is Kitchen United, a virtual kitchen operator that offers essentially it's a turnkey solution for restaurant brands to expand their reach to the off-premise diner through online delivery and pickup. I referred to it as a virtual kitchen operator on the slide. It's also known as a dark kitchen operator or a ghost kitchen operator. There's been a lot of press around the space recently, so people may recognize the business that it's in from those names. The problem that Kitchen United is solving for restaurants today is that they have a growing number of delivery orders coming into the restaurants from these online food delivery apps, which is both creating a logistical nightmare for the restaurant staff through the increased order volume, since they're really only set up to make food for restaurant guests. And the online orders are cannibalizing restaurants' in-store business, putting downward pressure on already thin restaurant margins. So Kitchen United is working with some of the largest restaurant brands in the US by essentially providing turnkey space for them to operate out of for the sole purpose of producing food for orders that are placed through online food delivery apps. And these apps are apps that I personally use all the time. Apps like Uber Eats and DoorDash, where orders can be placed and for pickup or delivery. KU's facilities effectively kind of lower the cost for food production for restaurant brands, since they're both removing the need of staffing a full restaurant, and then also making it easier for food delivery apps to pick up multiple orders from different brands at the same location. Our RXR actually co-led the company's Series B financing alongside Google Ventures, and we're now helping the company scale within the New York City region, which is one of the top food delivery markets in the world, as well as making strategic introductions to other landlords who are trying to solve for, unfortunately, a growing number of vacancies within their retail locations. So that is kind of what I wanted to cover. I don't know if there are any questions now, or we could take questions at the end, but if not, I think I just want to hand it off to Corey to do a deeper dive on workplace strategy.
Sure. We don't have any questions pending at the moment, so that's great.
Okay, great.
I think you got to stop sharing. All right. Does that work?
It does. Hopefully we'll be able to get sound okay.
All right. Yeah, so I thought, before I start talking about kind of what we've done post-COVID or our plans post-COVID, it would be helpful just to frame up what we did for COVID, but I'm going to be a little lazy and let Scott, our CEO, talk about that. So we just have a quick video that we produced with Microsoft that kind of frames up everything we did for the COVID reopening.
My name is Scott Reckler. I'm CEO. My name is Scott Reckler. I'm CEO and chairman of RXR Realty. From our formation in 2007, we became one of the largest owners of office properties in the New York metro region. What used to be the real estate of the past, which was about building a building with four walls and collecting rent, as we've grown that business, what became clear to us is that it was more about activating what happened within those four walls and thinking about real estate as a service to support your customers. And we were on that path to reimagine the future of that workplace. And COVID hits. New Yorkers have the ability to overcome the greatest challenges our nation ever faced. And whenever we've had these challenges, we come back and we rebuild stronger. But I felt it was a civic responsibility to bring people back to the workplaces, because for every one person that's working in an office building, it creates 5 service jobs. To bring people back to work rejuvenates and reactivates our city streets and our small businesses and the energy that makes New York great. In talking through things with the Microsoft team, we developed what we call RxWell. We took the best of our physical and our digital, what we call Phygital, to build a holistic program to bring people back to the workplace so they're safe, that they feel safe, that they can see the transparency of the health and wellness of the buildings, and the tools to change behaviors to get the best of the workplace during this abnormal period. These tools enable us to monitor compliance. What's the capacity in any of our particular spaces? Are people wearing their face masks? Are people social distancing? With Microsoft, we then began to think about how do we use the tools that we create to help reopen our office buildings, to help reopen New York City? How do we open the great indoors that people can come back and experience New York City's extraordinary restaurants, cultural institutions, retail venues, and streetscapes that make our city so special? And do it in ways that they know every precaution has been taken to ensure that they are safe and that people around them are complying with the necessary safety protocols. By doing this, we can figure out how to reopen our city and responsibly coexist with COVID. We're not returning to what once was, nor can we just wait for the coronavirus to go away. With RXWell, we have the tools to safely and responsibly thrive in the new abnormal. Whether it's reconnecting with our colleagues, having dinner with friends, or getting lost in a museum, RXWell provides the tools to keep us safe, combined with the transparency we need to feel safe. It's time to reopen the great indoors.
So yeah, I think that gives you a quick summary of kind of everything that we built for COVID. It was interesting, COVID really accelerated the tech plan that we had. I think, Matt mentioned that it made technology go from being kind of a nice to have to a need to have. It really ramped up what we were doing here. So I think I started at RXR about 6 weeks before Cuomo sent everybody home. So I was in the office for a brief period, and during that time, our goal was for the year, build out an app, build out some technology, and deploy it in a few buildings. And because of COVID, we ended up massively accelerating that, rolling out an app to all of our buildings, so 26 buildings and around 20 million square feet in June, and rolling out a data platform and a few thousand sensors by September. So it really compressed a lot of the work we did, but it also laid a really amazing foundational work for a lot of stuff that we're trying to do kind of post-COVID. So, we are, I think it's come up a couple times that the term seismic shift, and there definitely was one going on before COVID, but I think it's almost been exaggerated by some of the trends that are coming out of COVID, and particularly around the consumerization of the office. And I say consumerization of the office is kind of a byproduct of the work from home trend. Everyone had an opportunity to work from home, and it forced that on companies that have never had to provide that to any of their employees, and it opened up choice. It's similar to the way that kind of the e-commerce transformation opened up choice for customers, in the late 90s and early aughts. You used to only shop at the store in your town. The minute there were online retailers, you could shop at every single store, and you had so much more optionality that it forced a shift in the way that people market, merchandise, and offer up their products. And it changed the way that retailers think about their customer and moved them to more of a data-driven approach. And we see that happening with commercial real estate as well. Now that employees can choose between coming to the office, staying home, going to a third place, we need to understand and entice them through a data-driven approach to come to the office if that's what we want. And employers need to understand their employees and how they move around, and be able to kind of shape their behaviors through a more data-driven approach.
Corey, we had a webinar about 2 months ago where we had a lot of New York brokers involved, and they talked about the fact that on Mondays and Fridays at that point, only 6% of the office space in some of those buildings was even occupied. And they were concerned about the potential for some of those workers never coming back. But there was a number of them that felt that eventually they would, because you need that collaboration. You need to be able to really see and work with people, not just in this Zoom environment.
I completely agree, and thanks for the setup. Because I think there is the kind of threat of everybody just working from home. Most of the customers we're talking to, they're not planning on going fully remote, but offering up this kind of hybrid option. But putting the choice in the hands of the employee to kind of come in, or at least when to come in, but still, you know, expecting their employees to come in a couple days a week. And we do expect them to still do that, because, you know, there's been a lot of data coming out about the challenges of purely remote work. There was a good report from HBR just about burnout, and how much that has increased because of remote work, because there is no work-life boundary. You live at work, so you can't really leave the office. And so people are working a lot more hours, but they're also losing that connection. And so we do expect people to be coming back to do collaboration, to kind of help, you know, create those connections that they need for their career and for development. So we don't see people as an either or, where it's either all remote or all in office, and we do see that mix. But we see the space itself changing a lot. You know, the idea of desk entitlement, where every single person has a desk or an office, you know, a lot of people are probably going to move away from that, and really rethink their spaces as more collaboration spaces, and provide different kind of modes of working. That said, with the hybrid kind of trend is definitely top of mind, and particularly as our buildings are still not, you know, anywhere near fully occupied. But the kind of push towards sustainability that was happening pre-COVID, we see continuing, and COVID did shine a light on some interesting things. One, you know, in our buildings and across New York, when they emptied out, everyone left in March. Energy consumption only dropped around 20%. So it really highlighted the fact that you know, so much of the energy is being consumed by the tenant space, by kind of zombie equipment. All the Wi-Fi routers were still on, the TVs were still plugged in. The people in the building aren't really causing the load. Yes, they turned the lights off, but that was actually a small amount of energy consumption. And we need to do a lot more work with our tenants to kind of reduce that. And then, you know, there is the kind of continued challenge of things like Local Law 97 and the increasing, you know, penalties there. And there are things we can do at the base building to reduce our footprint. But, you know, COVID forced us to actually make a step back to some extent. So we've, you know, in our buildings, we're recirculating the air, or sorry, exchanging the air every 2 hours with outside air to make sure it's fresh. That is, you know, much less efficient than how we were running kind of pre-COVID. So we're going to need to find a middle ground there, and how we can, you know, provide for safe environments, but, you know, meet our sustainability goals. And on the point of the kind of safe environment, we don't see this going away, and the focus on health and safety we don't see disappearing. So, you know, we see some parts of COVID probably becoming endemic, and kind of need for some of the things that we put in place as, you know, temporary measures during COVID and persisting afterwards, you know, in the same way that the turnstiles that are in almost every single commercial office building were put in place as a byproduct of 9/11. People don't really, you know, remember that. We see some of the things that we put in, maybe it's the temperature scanners, maybe it's, you know, wearing masks, those things kind of sticking around post-COVID, but also just the overall awareness of health and wellness. You know, people have, you know, a heightened awareness of, you know, mental health and some of the challenges coming out of the remote work, but also just, you know, increased awareness of personal health. So we think that that's going to be something we have to address as a landlord, both through things like air quality, but also through additional amenities and services.
It's got to be really hard to retrofit some of these buildings. The average skyscraper in Manhattan is what, 80 years old, 75 years old?
Yeah, yeah.
You've got to actually build all this technology into a really old asset.
It has been a challenge. You know, a lot of the stuff we're having to put in, you know, we're working with cellular networks and things like that, so we don't have to put as much wiring into our buildings. You know, fortunately, the technology is getting a little cheaper and a little lighter. So a lot of the sensors we're putting in are battery powered, so there's a little less infrastructure. But you know, getting like a full smart building and really changing a lot of building management system and kind of true automation is going to be a longer term project and a bigger lift. Part of the thing we're trying to do is at least get the data out so that we have, all the insights, but also actually push that data down to the tenants and the employees so that we can affect behavior change. So things like, sustainability, making sure that every single employee in our building knows their impact and in terms of greenhouse gas, so that they are more conscious and start to kind of shift their behavior and change. So while there's a lot of technology you have to put in place, we're hoping, we can also change kind of the human behavior side as well. Maybe saves us some of the automation. But in terms of where we're headed, kind of COVID, based on those trends, we're really focusing on these art tech build on a couple key areas. So there's that hybrid workplace and servicing the employees, the employers and us as an owner. Sustainability and operations as well, looking for more cost efficiency, knowing we're having to lean more into amenities and more of like a higher level of experience, which is going to cost more. So we're looking to kind of recoup those costs in other places, through operational efficiency. And then, as I mentioned, the health and wellness, providing more amenities and services to the employees in our building, and just ensuring that the space is safe and, meeting the highest level in terms of wellness that we can. In terms of what we've built and how we've done this, we see this as an integrated problem. So we needed an integrated solution. So there's a lot of point solutions out there for almost everything we're doing. You can go get a tenant experience app. You can go find a provider that will do air quality monitoring. There's a ton of off-the-shelf solutions that'll just do occupancy counting. But in order to really kind of cause that behavior change and really get valuable insights, we need things that are cross-cutting. So we need the data from the occupancy sensors to show up in the app, also feed into our insights platform, and inform and tie that together with energy data so we can inform like building management. So we needed to create this integrated platform that's the software side. So we built a data platform ourselves, working with Microsoft on a lot of the infrastructure for that, and our own app, and then have been working with a lot of partners on hardware and sensor to get that data into the platform. One of the big hardware components is edge computing. So we are installing devices on site that can do a lot of the computational work. This is for a couple reasons. Like one is for privacy. So I think when you saw the first video running, there was a little brief clip of some people walking and social distancing monitoring of them. So we're processing our security camera footage to look for social distancing bottlenecks, challenges with mask compliance. We're looking for some other kind of post-COVID use cases for that around security and safety. But that is confidential information. We do not want that video footage to leave the building. So we need to process that on the edge. And we don't, we want to maintain the privacy of everyone in our building. So we process the footage. We don't store any of the footage in that device. And then we just stream out the raw data of, ones and zeros around mask compliance. So the edge compute thing is really important for that privacy piece. And then also just reducing latency and allowing us to, take the data and quickly feed it back to other systems. So, for example, our bathrooms, we're monitoring occupancy and displaying that directly outside of it so that if it's crowded and you shouldn't go in because you want to maintain social distancing. But to make sure that the minute somebody leaves, that sign updates with the correct number, we're actually processing the data at the edge and pushing that to the signage. And then the last pillar of this is the services and protocols. We've paired the technology with physical services, and Scott mentioned in his video that term digital, and we feel that's really important for our offering, is to pair the digital with that physical piece, so that we can help our customers make the insights actionable. So an example is the on-site testing services that we're providing. So we've started a joint venture with one of the largest mobile medical providers in the US to provide on-site testing services in our commercial buildings, and we're doing a few thousand tests a week now. This is really useful, and then we pair it with the data so people can understand, or at least our occupiers can understand trends in their employee base and how infections are trending, whether they're going up or down. We can kind of catch those outbreaks early on. And then we also have technology, a wearable that goes with that for contact tracing. So if we did, through the physical test, find someone who has COVID, we can use the digital tools for contact tracing to identify the pool of people that were in contact and do further testing with them. And the reverse being true if we have the wearables that people are wearing and someone finds out that they had COVID because their family member or someone they got from the community, they can do contact tracing and pair that with the testing service. So that digital technology to kind of help identify the network and then the testing service to go with it is just one example of how we're pairing that technology and service together.
It's a really neat technology, but if somebody tests positive, let's say for COVID or whatever the next pandemic is it an issue notifying those people that they came in contact with, or is that something that the employee has to sign off on, saying it's okay to contact those people they came in contact with?
Yeah, so that wearable is something that we are selling as an added service to employers. So we're not managing those. We're not managing that contact piece. So the employer can opt to give this to all of their employees. The employees would agree to use it, and we actually went with wearables instead of trying to do it with a phone or something like that, because it is much more privacy centric. So there is no identifiable information on it. There's just an ID, and you can contact trace off of that ID, and then the HR person would have the key as to how those IDs associate with individuals. But it keeps all the data separate from personal identity. But it is with a lot of this technology, there is kind of a privacy hurdle, or at least privacy challenge, that we've been trying to take a privacy by design approach where we don't even have the data on our systems that would allow us to violate somebody's privacy.
Understood. Well, you had mentioned earlier, going through 9/11, some of the privacy that we ended up giving up after that, and some of the security we had to put in place in order to prevent the next, let's say, terrorist attack in a particular area. This is very similar in that we're trying to protect people from health crisis spreading in the future.
Yeah, it is. Definitely a good analog, and definitely hoping that the privacy that people have had to give up doesn't stay that way. But we've also tried to separate. I mentioned a lot of our tools, like we didn't want our app to be used for contact tracing because we see that app persisting post-COVID, whereas probably the contact tracing, hopefully not. So we made the contact tracing a wearable. People can leave that at home and never see it again, and they know the app is not tracking them. So I think also just trying to be as transparent and clear as to where we're tracking and how we're tracking, so people are able to kind of control it, opt in or out. And then this is just kind of a slide showing all the different touch points in the overall journey. But maybe just to open it up for any questions.
Would you mind kind of walking us through, somebody comes into one of these buildings, and I noticed a lot of what you're looking at is the possibility of more of a marriage between residential and commercial buildings as well. As somebody walks into the building, what happens with your technology? What does it track, and how does it track it?
Sure. So it actually starts like well before they come into the building. So right now they can open their app at home. They can take a building access questionnaire that is tied to our testing provider. So if they've tested positive, they will be blocked from access or be told not to come into the building. They can also check data about the building from their app, so they can see how crowded the building is and even foot traffic in the lobby, so they can time their entry. And maybe if it's crowded in the lobby, they could go get a coffee on the way in. They can also we're integrating with transit information now, so they can also check transit, and then they head in. When they get to the building, we're rolling out mobile access control, so they are able to use their phone to unlock the doors and go through the turnstile. We currently have elevated body temperature scanners in our entry space. These are not little kiosks. It's actually a single kind of camera that it can acquire and scan someone within 2 seconds. So we can have people can just flow through the space. They don't have to stop or anything. They just walk right in, and we're able to continuously scan everyone and check the temperature. If someone has an elevated temperature, the security team is alerted, and they just can pull them out and do a hand scan, and then talk to them if they actually do scan a second time as having a high temperature.
And these scanners are pretty high up in the ceiling, right?
They're about 7 or 8 feet. They're on stands.
Okay.
We did not mount them aspirationally, hoping that they're not a permanent thing, but and also if they become permanent, we probably will have to mount them in the ceiling, but right now they're on stands. Yeah, and then once they get in the building, we do have most of our buildings, the touchless elevators. They can go up to their space. In their space, we are providing some services. We are doing the on-site testing. So any employer that's elected to do that, we actually come into their office. We can set up in a conference room, and once a week do PCR tests or rapid testing. We have through a few partnerships with hardware providers. We can do occupancy sensors within the tenant space. And again, this is a service they would opt into and provide them more granular analytics on how their space is being used, as well as insights around social distancing. The way the sensors work, we're able to tell how many people are in a space at any point in time and how close they are. So we can kind of give them reporting on social distancing violations and just generally how compliant the group is on social distancing. There's also the security cameras that I mentioned,
right.
In the lobby and a few other places where we are monitoring for social distancing and mask compliance. And again, that's just aggregate data that we're reporting on, so we can understand trends, and then we can map that back to floor plans, so we can see where the issues are happening, and then we can adjust the flow in our lobbies, potentially reallocate our security teams just for monitoring. We're not identifying individuals that aren't wearing masks. We're just looking at trends and where it's happening. And then elsewhere in the building, we do have the occupancy sensors in the bathrooms, so we're able to tell how crowded they are. Also, the cleaners have a wearable, and there's a button, so they tag a button whenever they clean the space. So we have real-time data on how often it's cleaned and how many times it's used in between cleanings, so we can start to optimize our cleaning. We can also share that data out, so it shows up on the displays outside, so the last time it's cleaned and how full it is. But then also in the app, you can check and see how busy the bathrooms are. If the one on your floor is crowded, you can possibly go down the stairs or down the hall, and you can also see when it was last cleaned and even make a cleaning request. And then we have a few other pieces there. We are working with a few different flex providers and a few other options for kind of flex space to kind of help with the hybrid issue as people realize their space needs are changing. Maybe they need more collaboration space. We can provide that through either pre-built or flex offering. Yeah, I think that kind of covers the full journey, and then basically they can head back out at the end of the day.
Sure. It's funny. I got excited when they started putting the information up in parking garages, which tells you what level there's still spaces located on and what aisles they're in, so you don't have to hunt for them. We have a few questions coming in from the audience. I did want to ask you though, with all this technology being put into these buildings, do you expect in the long run to get a return on this investment? Is it going to pay for itself in the long run? How do you see that working? That's kind of a question to both of you.
Sure. So I think we definitely see it paying for itself in the long run. Right now we're seeing that our buildings occupancy, some of our buildings, the occupancy is 50%, which is much higher than the kind of baseline for the New York area. And I think that is attributable to, in some ways, the technology making people feel safe. They know that the spaces are not overly crowded. They're able to see the air quality, and they know that that's being managed to, within a, humidity levels and CO2 levels that are less conducive to COVID. So I think that sense of safety that they get is making people feel comfortable coming back into our offices more so than others. So I think the occupancy is, an indicator that the tech is at least making our buildings more appealing to tenants. And, there is a flight to quality that we see happening. And, we think the technology will differentiate us. And, as people come up to renew leases, they will come to our buildings as opposed to others. So we do see it paying off in those terms. Whether it'll get us a premium, it's hard to say right now with the market as it is. But I think it'll at least allow us to be much more competitive in the space.
It's always hard from the bottom to see what's going to happen at the end. I'm sorry, Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to some of the things that Corey was saying. And, I think there are certain technologies out there that come with their own, definable value proposition and return on investment. So in other words, you can trace back the additional revenue generated from implementing that technology directly by, direct billing to a tenant, or you might be able to reduce your operating expenses within a building. And in those scenarios, you do have, a very defined payback period and return on investment for that individual piece of technology. But I think one of the other things that Corey started to touch on, which I think is, something interesting and important to highlight, is kind of, the brand equity that owners are able to generate and create with their customers or, tenants. And it's usually, brand in the context of commercial real estate is usually associated with retail or hospitality. And I think what we're starting to see is, some of those same aspects, and some of it's related to technology, some of it's related to, a service model, let's say, will result in things we believe will result in things like higher tenant retention or lower churn, which obviously are much less quantifiable, but still important to the business nonetheless.
In the long run, it might be quantifiable. We had a few questions from the audience. One asked about these masonry buildings, and with all the technology you're putting into them, are you able to bring a significant level of energy efficiency into it? And also, actually also asked how difficult it is to get Wi-Fi throughout some of these buildings that are concrete.
I think the energy efficiency, I'm going to have to punt on that only because our buildings are so unoccupied right now. It's really hard to say. Like we've, introduced the technology when there was 0 people in there. Maybe it's 10 to some of them are 50%, but we're not back to the point that I can tell if we're really saving on the energy side. And, our first focus was on the safety piece. So we're just now getting into a lot of the more complex integrations to optimize for, energy efficiency and sustainability. So, we're not seeing the payoff yet. In terms of, the concrete buildings and network, it hasn't been a huge problem, but we are using a pretty wide range of networking protocols. Like there's, some of our devices using long-range Wi-Fi or LoRaWAN, which that will go through a couple floors pretty easily, and in open air it can go for 2 kilometers. So that's like, it hasn't been a problem. Bluetooth is the other one, and that's pretty short range, so that's usually not going through concrete anyways. And we are looking into like longer term, CBRS and kind of the 5G options, but that's probably 2 to 3 years out in the future because there's not a lot of hardware that supports it.
Sure. Ted had a question regarding the health service technologies. What's being installed, how much of it is provided by the building owner and how much is provided by the tenants individually? Or maybe paid for might be a better way to say that.
Yeah. So the health service stuff, there's a couple things we're doing. We have a partnership with Northwell where we're actually providing like telemedicine in our app. that is mainly tied to that building access questionnaire. And as people start to fill it out, you get to that question about, do you have a headache and scratchy throat? And people start to have challenges self-diagnosing. So you can call 24/7 Northwell trained medical staff and talk with them about it. That's basically an amenity, and we're paying for that. The on-site testing services, that is actually revenue generating for us. So we are, we staff that, have the equipment, and provide that to the employer as a service, but they are paying for that testing on a per employee basis. So that's, in terms of who's paying for it, it kind of depends on the piece.
If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. I've always had the problem with the health apps that I look at it for 5 minutes and realize that I'm dying in 2 weeks from whatever ailment happens to be the latest one. So it's fascinating technology, putting all this into buildings to try and prevent the next issue. You had also mentioned, and maybe I'll bring it back up for a second, the fact that some of these conflict with each other. The fact that we're trying to circulate air every 2 hours in the building actually makes it a little bit challenging to, Shannon's saying I'm hard to hear. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound like you've got a robot voice on now.
Sorry about that. So with you had mentioned the fact that circulation every 2 hours, it actually limits the energy efficiency. Is there some plan in place to try and eliminate that issue in the future?
We are doing that mainly because of COVID and wanting to make sure the air is fresh. So we're basically pulling in, outside air and fully flushing the air in the building every 2 hours and exchanging it. Normally we exchange the air in the morning, lock it down, we condition and everything, but it's much more energy efficient to kind of keep the air inside and recirculate. So I'm sure we're going to change that frequency to not be every 2 hours, but as things get safer, but we may not be able to get back to where we were. That's probably, it's a little out of my league in terms of exactly how our HVAC systems work, and I want to pull in our building engineer, but we are looking at other ways to ensure the freshness of that, whether it's additional filtration, UV sterilization, and some other tech we can put in that will achieve the same goal without the energy footprint. The exchanging air with the outside was the quickest thing we could do, and met the need, but we do need to move away from that.
I apologize for my sound being apparently in and out. Anything you'd like to add? Actually, there was a question from Andrew. Do both of you expect these technologies to expand into other areas of real estate like single-family housing developments? I know you're already putting that into multifamily.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that a little bit, depending on which types of technologies you're speaking to or about. The short answer is yes, and in some ways, the single-family housing market, from a real estate tech perspective, has developed more quickly than the ecosystem on the commercial side, and a partial part of the reason for that is that the customer who you're selling to is oftentimes pretty different. You're making a sale from a technology company's perspective to a consumer as opposed to a business or a property management company or an owner of a commercial asset. And so it's all, the residential side is actually, believe it or not, a larger market in terms of just asset value here in the US and globally. So it is a big area of opportunity. It's also an area that we're exploring from an investment perspective.
And there's actually,
go ahead,
I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, in the digital lab, I'm responsible for the commercial side, but we do have another team working on residential, and there is overlap, like the tech that we have for the bathroom occupancy. We're looking at using that for gym occupancy and amenity kind of usage tracking on the
Got it.
resi side.
Tried switching microphones here, so hopefully it's a little bit better. One other question, some of these new building design plans, they are asking if you're planning on putting in landing pads for drone delivery.
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, we have been looking at some autonomous robots for delivery, because food and beverage delivery in the buildings is definitely growing as a challenge. More and more people are just ordering, and there's a line of Uber guys out the door. So I think we'll have to figure out delivery. I don't know if it'll be drone pads or not, but maybe.
I think that's all we've got. I really appreciate both of you coming on. It's a fascinating subject, and everything RXR is doing is really interesting, and I'm going to follow it going into the future as well.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And for the rest of you, I'm going to introduce two other individuals, two of our alumni, Myra Juarez Gutierrez and Christina Diana. Myra is part of the Wells Fargo Multifamily Capital Group, working with sponsors and developers to finance and structure multifamily acquisitions and new construction. She specializes in mixed income and affordable housing transactions throughout the country. And Christina is part of the construction and real estate consulting group at EY. She works with clients across all markets, financial services, energy, healthcare, government, life sciences, consumer products, and more to provide corporate real estate solutions and strategy, and specializes in end-to-end real estate strategic planning by transforming workplaces and real estate portfolios into strategic and competitive advantages by driving leading practice standards. And it's great to see both of you. Thank you. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Lauren. Christina, it looks like we matched for our fireside chat. You're on mute. Oh.
We didn't plan this.
Yeah, so Shannon was kind of to tap us to talk a little bit about the Real Estate Alliance, and also just more generally about the Goodman Center and our involvement with the Goodman Center, and then also to help increase awareness about the overall Real Estate Alliance and the opportunities that are available to practice your leadership by maybe taking on a leadership position or just generally your networking skills. So we wanted to go through a few questions to get across on those points. So Christina, can you tell me a little bit about your involvement with the Goodman Center, both as a student and as a professional?
Yeah, sure. So for those of you who are alumni, and it's been a couple years, the Goodman Center was founded to kind of give students a way to get real world experience with real estate, which for me, I graduated 5 years ago, and it was something for 2.5, 3 years that provided that real world, unique experience that not many other schools offer. So there's the practicum, which if for those of you that are students, you're likely know about or you're a part of. And using all things from Argus to, just Excel to evaluate properties. It was something that a lot of people, when I started working in a real estate consulting world, didn't have experience to as students. It also offered up a lot of opportunities for me. I participated in the Villanova real estate case competition my senior year, which was with schools from around the country, and just provided a really good experience in presenting and preparing me for what presenting to clients would eventually look like. And then one thing that I have found useful, especially useful transferring into working, is the WX scholarship that Lehigh has such a great relationship with. And WX has told, Myra and I are both part of WX, it's women executives in real estate. And they particularly love Lehigh students, which is great. It's most of the when you get a scholarship, you become part of a mentoring program for 2 years. That's pretty formalized. And most of those fellow mentors I noticed were graduating from grad school in real estate programs. But Lehigh is one of the few schools where there's a lot of undergraduate students. So I think that's a testament to how comparable the Goodman Center is to graduate schools. So yeah, I'd say that's that's a good summary of everything about the Goodman Center and real estate program at Lehigh.
I'd like to think we're comparable.
Yeah, I remember the first breakfast I went to. So as part of WX, you get to go to these amazing breakfasts where they talk about different topics within real estate. And they're really exclusive. So the women that end up at these breakfasts are women who are in really high level executive positions, or and the speakers that come to them are people who are like very well known in their specific industry within real estate. So they're always like an amazing opportunity to like expand your knowledge base and everything. But I remember the first one I went to, everyone at my table, it was from like Harvard or like some like the NYU Stern real estate program. So yeah, I remember being a little intimidated, but definitely being like, wow, Leah prepared me. So I guess going along those lines, how did that transition from undergrad and the Goodman Center, how did that go, transition to like the Alliance and post-grad?
I think the Goodman Center is a great transition or bridge to the Alliance. So as students, you have the ability to attend events like this. So you kind of already have a taste for what the Alliance is like. But the Alliance is a great networking opportunity. And also it was a way for me to bring my mom, who was an alum, I won't share the year, a couple of years ago, and has been in real estate her whole life, but brought her into, introduced her to Shannon, and she's spoken on a few panels and events. So bringing my network to the table, and also leveraging all the people that have graduated Lehigh and in the real estate network, because although it's a niche market, the real estate industry is very large. So it's nice to have pockets of people that you can leverage and connect with. So Myra, what's your experience been like with the Alliance?
It's been really good. And especially when I first got to New York, I didn't know a ton of people. So it was a good way in real estate. I mean, it was a good way to meet people that were my age and folks that were a little bit older that I could use to pick their brains about what I wanted to do next. Like when I graduated Lehigh, I was an accounting major. So I went to the Big Four and didn't love it. So especially like those first 2 years, it was so nice to have access to so many people in real estate to say like, what do you do? Tell me a little bit more about your role. What does trajectory in your career look like at your company? So I think for that reason, it was really crucial and important. And now I think it's a nice way to reconnect with folks. I see a few people in the event, like attendee list, that I've connected with at other real estate events. So it's been nice. And then also just like recently, there was a student who reached out and said, hey, I'm interviewing here. Would you happen to know anyone who works there? I'm new to real estate and don't really know a whole lot. And I was able to connect them with someone that I actually met at a Women in Real Estate event as part of the Alliance programming. And she was able to connect with him and prep him for the interview and help him put his best foot forward as a Lehigh student and an alum. So that was really nice to be able to pay that forward through the Alliance. But yeah, overall, it's been a really good experience. And I really miss in-person events, like going to an event, then going after to get drinks with people. We need to bring those back. But it's been good. It's been a really good experience.
So Myra and Christina, we're getting a question. What is the Alliance? Can you explain it?
Yeah, so the Alliance is one of Lehigh's affinity groups. So I know, like, especially as a young alum, you're not always aware of those, but there's different industry related groups and also other groups like the Black and Latino Alumni Alliance, which I'm a part of. And it's essentially a collective of real estate alumni, of various types of alumni. The Real Estate Alliance affinity group is specifically real estate professionals or people who are just generally interested in real estate. And you can sign up through the Lehigh portal. But I think you can also email Shannon. She might hate me for this. And she'll connect you. And it's really just like a group of alumni who are real estate professionals who attend events and network with each other.
And I believe Shannon told us that you'll get a survey after this event. And there's an option there in that email to sign up to get emails from the Alliance. So she'll send anything from job descriptions people share with her to these events. So yeah.
Yes.
Yes, she just confirmed that in the chat.
Awesome. Yeah, I don't know if anybody else has any other questions related to the Alliance. We had a few questions prepped, but if anything comes through the chat, happy to answer those.
Not so far. Go ahead if you have anything you want to.
Anything that's your favorite part of the Alliance, Myra?
I think I touched on a little bit, but just the ability to network with more people outside of my close group. Like working as a real estate lender, I feel like my circle is pretty small. So it's nice to have the ability to go to some of these events and meet someone who's in real estate tech or someone who's in asset management or something really outside of my scope. Like what you were mentioning, to tap into them to get some of that real estate advice, or a deal comes across and I need to know something about a specific market. It's helpful to have that network to tap into.
Great. Well, thank you guys very much for everything. Appreciate it. And I think we'll start wrapping up if that's okay. Do you have anything you want to add before we wrap up?
I think we're good.
Perfect. And again, thank you all for joining us today. Actually, hold on. Let me give you one question that just popped in. How are you as a lender addressing affordability issues? That's a little outside the Alliance question, but I'll throw it in there just to see what happens.
Yeah. So my group specifically, I'm 100% focused on affordability. So I work with projects that have LIHTC components. So that's low income tax credits. I work with 80/20 or 70/30 deals, specifically mostly in New York. So that's projects that have affordability requirements by law, or also to get certain tax abatements or tax breaks. So I work with them in that capacity. I also work with properties that have what are called project-based vouchers, or other people know them as Section 8. So I work in those spaces, and mostly with developers and sponsors that are primarily focused on affordability. So I work with products that are really only provided to those types of transactions, and then most of the times end up being more economically beneficial for the sponsors, right? You get reductions in certain pricing if you are an affordable project, or even now we're seeing so much more of the green products. So that's a building that is more energy efficient or that has green aspects. So like if it's a multifamily property, if there's a park, or if there's a community center, if there's a residence coordinator, different things that would add to the building and not just a room or a space to live. There's different products that we work with to help make those things more economical for the project as well.
You know, it's funny when I hear affordability, I recall when I went to Lehigh, the interest rates on housing were 17%. And now these days they're below 3. That's seriously, these days they're below 3%. And even
Yeah.
for small businesses, the SBA loans are below 3% for a fixed rate 25-year loan. So
Yeah.
just a phenomenal affordability for small business, for people moving into properties right now.
Exactly. And even in the last year, we've been way busier than probably we ever thought we would have been at the beginning of 2020. And I think a lot of that just has to do with so many counties across the country recognizing that there is a lack of affordable product, and sponsors finding a way to make those projects work through some of those programs with Fannie or Freddie Mac. So we've been really busy, especially because of Treasury environments being so low. So.
Right. Because of time, I think I need to wrap it up. I do want to thank all of you for joining us today for this edition of Tech Talk with the Goodman Center for Real Estate at Lehigh University. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.